that stuck out the side of its head. It was covered head to toe in rust-colored, reddish-brown hair, long and coarse-looking. It didn't seem to have hair on its face or hands, but it was dark and I wasn't really focusing on details since I was scared shitless, so I could say for certain. I definitely noticed this musty, wet animal smell whenever it was nearby, but not the strong rotting garbage smell other people report when describing similar creatures. It just smelled like a dirty animal. Vocalizations were a bird-like warbling, chirping noise, a loud hooting noise like a chimp, and ear-splitting screeches that I really can't compare to anything else I've ever heard. At no time did it sound like intelligible speech or a human voice. This was definitely an animal. There were definitely two, since Kaiser had one cornered and another was throwing things at me, but I never saw more than one at a time and don't know if I saw the same one every time or if it was a different one at different times. The only signs of intelligence/tool usage were when they threw rocks and sticks at me/the cabin. I assume they're also what made the nest of sticks and leaves on the ground, but can't say for certain. They seemed attracted to my chili and beef stew, but didn't take the soup and deer corn bait I put out for them. Maybe because I wasn't cooking and spreading the smell of food, or maybe because they didn't want the bait. I was scared shitless, but even at the time I didn't think they really wanted to hurt me. They just wanted to steal my food and harassed me by throwing stuff. Questions?
At my aunt and uncle's in rural WI, late at night, I can't sleep. Go outside and have a smoke. It's October, so pretty chilly but no snow. Super quiet, newish moon, so also very dark. They live on a lot of land that is relatively uncleared. Except for the house and some outbuildings, it's all trees and trails with a big boggy patch in the middle. Still not sleepy, so I start wandering their plot, take a trail into the trees. Come out to a little outcropping with the bog before me. Still very quiet, wasn't exactly spooked, but I got that sudden feel of eyes on me. Look around, but nothing but moon shadows and reeds. Something laughs at me. Couldn't tell if it was in my head or actual sounds, but it was very loud, unfriendly laughter, like a joke at my expense. Brush animals burst into a frenzy all around. Dozens of birds winged the fuck out of there, squawking, and what sounded like a deer maybe crashed through the brush. Stood there like a frozen idiot while the nature around me noped the fuck out. I soon followed suit. Didn't sleep a wink that night. Uncle gets up with the dawn and finds me nursing a coffee in the kitchen. Tell him what happened earlier. Try to laugh about it, but he seems unpleasantly surprised and resigned. Stares at me for a moment, takes a deep breath. Tells me to follow him. Uncle leads me to the cellar and we go down the steps. Haven't been down there in years and years. There's a door on the far wall I didn't remember ever seeing. Ask him where the fuck that goes after he opens it to stark blackness. He gives me a look as he snags a lantern from a shelf by the door. Says, "Old root cellar my grandpap dug. Follow me." Walk into a small square room that has a rough tunnel in the back corner. Looks kinda like a mine shaft but rather short. Wood trusses every few feet. You know what I mean. Tunnel isn't very long. We walk for maybe a full minute. come to the end of the tunnel, a rough door of old wood held in place by some cinder block along the bottom. We move it out of the way and step through into the gray dawn. I look around, blinking the dark from my eyes and adjusting to the light. Realize we're just a handful of yards downwind from where I had stood last night overlooking the bog. Look at my uncle to see him studying me expectantly. This is about where you were last night yet? All I can do is nod. I hadn't told him where I'd heard the laughter. He starts telling me about how his family first settled on this land, from Norway. Strange sounds and things had always plagued the boggy area. His grandfather had done most of the building and clearing of the land, and had inexplicably died shortly after digging out the root cellar. He had apparently been obsessed with this root cellar, and had never allowed anyone but himself inside, not even to just grab a jar of pickles. After his grandpa died, my uncle and his brother finally went down to investigate the root cellar. That's when they found the tunnel. At this point he motions me to go back through the door, and we walk about halfway back up the tunnel. Here at a slight bend he stops, and looking at me moves the light close to the wall. There is a hole here I hadn't noticed on our way through the first time. My uncle, visibly pale now and a slight shake to his hand, asks if I want to take a look. Something in his voice tells me I fucking shouldn't, but I can't resist. I peer over the rim of this hole. Absolutely pitch black, and the light seems to be swallowed by it in an off-putting way, like it's barely penetrating in. Oh shit balls, as I hear that same laughter again, but so much louder. Nearly break my neck spinning around to look at my uncle. His eyes are wide. He heard it too. Seems frozen in place. Against my very instincts I look again. Eyes, or something, dimly reflecting the lantern light back at us. Dozens of them. I stare in petrified fascination as a wet fetid air seems to leak from the hole. More growling laughter comes with this stench. Something finally breaks within us, and we absolutely book it back up the tunnel and into the cellar. What the fuck was that? I yelled at him as we catch our breath by the now firmly slammed root cellar door. Uncle shakes his head. He has no idea. Said he hadn't been in the cellar himself since that day he and his brother had first investigated and discovered that. Over the years he had tried to convince himself it had just been a youthful fancy. When I told him earlier about the laughter, it brought that crumbling down. He laughs shakily and says ignorance is bliss, but he felt he had had to take me down there. I agree as I stare at the thick door of the root cellar. He tells me how, though autopsy had ruled his grandpap's death as natural causes, his grandmother had a different story to tell. According to her, his grandfather had been found belly up in the bog with his eyes scooped out and no other visible injuries. Apparently the rest of the family at the time had reacted very poorly to this, but the grandmother had been the one to discover his corpse. At this moment I recalled my uncle's brother had committed suicide, but I didn't know anything more than that. I hesitantly asked him about this. He looked at me a long while. Yes, he said. He was found dead of a gunshot wound in the chest. and no eyes. After this my uncle actually started to cry, so we just got blind drunk that day after he called off work, and we have never spoken about that morning again. I gathered from some further drunken ramblings before I passed out that he's terrified he'll be found dead one day, with his eyes gouged out. He's still alive, and they live there still. I don't know what I'll do if he's found dead like that. 2 years ago. 23 years old. Have girlfriend who lives with her parents out in the fucking wilderness in Indiana, about 30 miles from where I live in a city. She has dial-up internet because that's literally her only option. Can see a shitload of stars at her house, have a lot of good cookouts, hiking around her property, etc. Never really felt spooked until this experience. She has 2 friends over and I have one of my own. Sitting around the fire outside. Her house is on a hill. Fire pit is at the bottom of the hill in a clearing right near the treeline. Her friends have been here before and so they understand there is no Wi-Fi available. This is my friend's first time coming here. So he doesn't know, as I forgot to mention it. Oh no. We're gonna have to talk and socialize. The fucking horror. Notice him looking at his phone and tell him the cell service is non-existent until you get to the R. He says he's just on the Wi-Fi but nothing is loading still. He laughs and asks if she leaves it unsecured since the nearest neighbor is so far away anyway. We're all just staring at him confused. I tell him there is no Wi-Fi. She has dial-up that barely works. He shows me on his phone that he's connected to an unsecured Wi-Fi network. There is no name for the network. It's just blank. Signal on it is very poor, too. No bars showing up on the Wi-Fi icon like when you're right at the edge of it even being detected. This is weird to us, but I've never tried to get Wi-Fi signal out here since I knew she had none, and nearest possible signal from a neighbor was like 2 miles up the road. As we're talking about how strange it is, friend says, "Whoa, look." All huddle around his phone. The nameless signal has gained a bar. The nameless signal has gained a bar. Tell him to try and load a web page or refresh Facebook or something to see if it works. Still nothing. No internet available. Hear a weird low hum. If you've ever been near a power plant, it's similar to that underlying resonant hum beneath the buzzing. Hum is way off in the woods and very quiet, but we notice it because it wasn't there before. Signal gains another bar. The hum gets louder and the trees are moving further back in the woods as if there is a gust, but the air is pretty still. We're all looking